by end 24, we're at $1.6 trillion in interest expense on the debt.
Yes.
Total revenue for the federal government is in the $4 trillion range. So you're talking about 50%, well, not quite 50% of the revenue going to just interest expense.
Correct.
So again, if you're using that rough analogy, you make $100,000 a year, but you're paying $50,000 a year in credit card interest.
Correct.
That's kind of the financial situation, and worsening, right? Because they're adding to the debt year over year.
Yeah.
Mathematically impossible, right? The United States is bankrupt, and it is discharging this bankruptcy through, and this is where we talk about debt monetization, right?
Printing.
Which basically means printing of money, defaulting on the debt, but in a way that
it's a soft
citizens.
It's a soft default,
right? They don't pay for the default. They
do in their purchasing power and their savings getting debased.
Citizens pay for it though, right?
Oh,
they're
yeah.
They're actually
I'm sorry. You're saying the government doesn't pay for the default.
Exactly.
You're right. Yeah, no, we're all paying for it.
The government externalizes the cost of the default
water the beer
on the people by watering down the wine. Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
So what are people to do and think about all of this? I mean, this is scary.
Well, it is scary, and
large.
and I don't want to be an extremist, and I'm not trying to scare anybody above and beyond what I think is realistic. But what I've been saying, and it's not it's not like I've changed my tune, right? I've been saying this for 20 years, and certainly the last 5 years, is that the time is growing short, and that it is important for people to put their savings into assets that will be protected, that the government cannot print.
Right.
And the apex asset in that category is Bitcoin. But there are others too. I mean, gold and silver work, housing works, autos work. I mean, just stuff.
Right.
Goods and
services.
Goods and services. Yeah. I mean, because storing food, whatever it might be. I mean, as it gets worse and worse, in Weimar, Germany, where they had a hyperinflation, I mean, people were getting paid and literally that day rushing out to buy things.
Yes.
Because they knew the price of said things would be more one day later.
Yes. Yes. Well, even worse than that, they would buy all their beer at the bar at the beginning of the night because the bar would change the prices of beer as the night
I didn't know that story. I believe it. I believe it. Yeah.
So it's crazy, right? It doesn't, again, you can't
outrun it.
You can't be prudent.
No.
You can't. And the whole point of economics is to be prudent, right? To produce more than you consume and save.
Correct.
But you can't save in this environment. So it destroys the process of savings. And the process of savings is the process of civilization,
Absolutely.
Right? Delayed gratification, production in excess of consumption. This is how we've built up all of this.
I mean, this is just to go back to the very basics, this is where, the fisherman was catching fish by hand.
Exactly.
And had, one fish a day or whatever. He was lucky enough to snare with a spear by hand. And then he took a few days off, or he starved, or somebody else fed him with something else. And he figured out a way to, put together a net, which, was in a way savings. He took, and that net then allowed him to catch a lot more fish.
Yeah.
And his productivity went up. But that only occurred because he had saved up enough dried fish that he had something to eat for the time when he was making the net, or somebody else fed him with something else.
That's right.
And so you have to accumulate capital to invest in productivity to make the world a more efficient place and have all of our living standards go up.
Exactly.
If you don't do that, as you said earlier, I like the word where you said you eat the seed corn.
Yes.
If you eat the seed corn, you don't have anything to plant to get corn in the future.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Or another one that people use often is, you're burning the furniture for heat.
Exactly.
Well, it's really nice. You're warm.
Yes.
But what are you going to sit on?
Yes. Sacrificing your long run interest to your short run interest.
Your short run needs.
Yes. Needs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So these Treasury auctions, then the U.S. is insolvent.
Yep.
People are then only willing to buy shorter duration debt because the longer term prospects are increasingly bleak, as you've spelled out here. They can see that
inflation's coming.
Would we also expect these treasuries to start yielding more, right?
Yes.
That people, creditors will charge more given the risk associated with these notes.
Yeah, the people who are buying those things, in my opinion, it's amazing they are. They in the proverbial, game, they are the suckers at the table. Anyone who's buying a treasury bill, right? And a treasury, I should say a treasury note or bond, which is by definition longer term.
Right.
I mean, I own some treasury bills. They mature in 4 weeks.
Right.
But If you're buying longer duration fixed income debt, you're going to get smoked because inflation is going to continue, in my opinion, going to continue to accelerate. You're not going to get your purchasing power back. And so yes. As this becomes more and more developed, interest rates are going to go higher. I mean, bond holders already, the 60/40 portfolio holders have already been smoked. I mean, bond funds are down 50% in the last 3 years.
Right.
And the interest rates haven't compensated them for that.
Yeah.
And some people think we're going back to a deflationary world. I don't. We're in an inflationary cycle that's going to be brutal, in my opinion. And so, as these interest rates go higher, that makes the government's condition worse. And this is what we describe, and James Lavish has done the best job of showing this on Twitter, is as a death doom loop. I mean, interest rates go up, the government's interest rate costs get higher. That makes the deficit higher. That means you've got to sell more debt. When you sell debt, you have to find buyers. It's a supply and demand thing. Buyers say, I'm not willing to buy at that price. I need a higher interest rate. Okay, interest rates are up, more interest cost, bigger deficit. It's a doom loop.
Wow.
It's a cycle, right? Wow. And eventually what I could see happening is the entire federal government bond market comes to the Federal Reserve and says, sold to you. I don't want to hold this shit anymore. And the Fed has to buy it because, look, we saw last fall when interest rates went through 5%, that was an earthquake. And within 2 weeks, you saw 14 Fed governors come out and talk about how, oh, no, we're done raising rates and we think the interest rates, and they talked it back down to under 4%. They had to. They knew that 5 was a critical number. They absolutely had to. And, if interest rates went to 10%, like Jamie Dimon the other day said he thought interest rates would go to 8%. If interest rates go to 8%, this entire country is going to be bankrupt. There's no way. And the federal government's going to be bankrupt. The average interest rate today on the federal debt is about 3.2. Okay, the average short-term note is selling at about 5. As these things roll over and they go back into the short-term notes at 5, and imagine the short-term note could go to 6 or 7 or 8. This debt charge is going to become $2 trillion or $3 trillion. On 4. So we're going to get to the point where interest is the entire taxable, revenue. And you see where we're going here. It's but by the way, before anyone panics, my sense is they're not going to let that happen. In other words, they are not going to let the bond market fail. They are not going to let us get into the government's broken condition that everyone can see. They are going to subtly but surely figure out ways to print money. The most recent of which we discussed before the show was the BTFP. It wasn't a big number. It was a couple $100 billion, 140 billion. But, when Silicon Valley Bank failed, it was a big deal. Yeah. And so they wanted to prevent all the other banks from failing and, yelling, flip-flop back and forth between should we guarantee them all or shouldn't we? And we've got 17 trillion of bank deposits in this country. Can you imagine taking the whole 17 trillion onto the Fed balance sheet, which is now 7? That would have been a mess. Wow. But they ginned up this BTFP. They just pulled it out of thin air. So don't worry, banks. You got bad stuff, give it to us. 60 cents on the dollar, we'll give you $1 back. Yeah. Money printing. Yeah. And they're going to find more things like this. Of course. And they're going to say they're not money printing, but they are.
Of course.
And this is because they're doing what politicians do, which is they keep their system going and they lie about it.
Yes.
Right?
This is the perennial addiction that humans cannot kick, right? It's if you have the ability to print money, it is just the most politically expedient thing you can do, right? You don't need any votes. People don't understand the cost associated with it. It kicks the can down the road. Like it is just, it's sort of hidden in plain sight.
Exactly.
But the cost, or what do we say? The bill always comes due, right?
The bill comes due. We're paying it now with $5 gasoline. The bill for the next round will come due because, you're paying it in your steak bill. Yeah. Right. I don't know what ribeye is now, but
$35 a pound.
Yeah. Okay. So on the next round, the gasoline bills will be $8 or $10 a gallon, and your ribeye is going to be 50, or I don't know what the number is, but it's going to be higher, right?
Yeah, it went from 11, 12, 13, 3-4 years ago to 34, 35 today. Yeah. Probably going to triple again, right?
It's going to be higher.
So people, I guess the punchline, the action item on all of this is get ready for more inflation.
Sadly,
right?
Yes.
So hold things that cannot be printed.
Yes.
As savings, basically.
Yes, and even if you want to be a little aggressive, and I wouldn't recommend being highly aggressive, but borrowing to, small amounts that you can service and you won't be called in on.
Yeah.
And then exchanging that for something that's sound.
Right.
You will probably, I'm suggesting credit card debt at 20%.
Sure.
But, certainly I know I did it with a piece of property I bought back before COVID, and, the interest, 30-year money at 3%. I was like, that's a gift.
It's free money. Yeah, exactly.
I could have done what I was doing. I bought a house. I could have done what I was doing without doing that.
Right.
But I would rather have had that. I just used the Fannie Mae one. I just borrowed $500,000. Yeah. And I put it into Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Because and by the way, the Bitcoin has vastly outperformed the 3%.
Of course.
So, and this is, when you have a highly inflationary environment, carrying a small amount of debt that's low cost, that you won't be blown out of, isn't crazy if you're taking the proceeds. And actually, this is what Saylor is doing with MicroStrategy. Yeah. He's issuing debts, and he's using those debts to buy the sounder form of money. And he knows he will pay back those dollars that when they are debased.
Yes.
And he knows the asset he is purchasing will gain purchasing power against those dollars.
Exactly. So you're borrowing.
He's brilliant. And as you pointed out before we started, what was the MicroStrategy market cap 10 years ago? It's like,
I think they've gone from like 2 to 24 billion in less than 4 years.
Not bad.
Running that strategy.
Not bad, right? That works.
Yeah, and you're borrowing stronger dollars to pay back weaker dollars over time with debt covenants that are fixed, right?
Correct.
And it's on good collateral. The interest rate doesn't vary.
And you don't want to get highly levered.
Right.
I'm talking about small amounts because in general, I'm not a leverage guy.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing you don't do, just FYI, because I saw people do it and they got blown up, is do not borrow against your Bitcoin.
Of course. Too volatile.
Do not. It's too volatile.
Yeah.
And, people believe the Plan B model, last cycle. And I saw guys who had one Bitcoin, they borrowed 4 and it went down. They lost the one.
Out.
Yeah,
exactly.
they got wiped out.
Yeah, yeah.